I've been asking for help with this book. Some from people who might be able to help me navigate YouTubing a little bit, and I received some feedback, constructive criticism. Have a better microphone, look at the audience, don't film with the light behind me. I think that having the light behind me is actually different and probably not great as far as YouTube quality, but I don't mind that you don't get a clear picture of my face, because this isn't really about me. In any case, today I think I have something that might be interesting to debate, discuss, and talk about. The camera is a little bit shaky, I grant you. But if I had the money to put on a fantastic show, then I probably would. I don't have those kinds of resources right now. That's half of why I'm trying to garner interest in the book. Perhaps if enough people are interested and want me to actually complete this work, because I do need one more year of research on it, then perhaps in time, I'll create some kind of Patreon page or something along those lines, and people can contribute to this project. Today's interesting factoid has to do with the ages of the apostles when Jesus was ministering. It also has to do, in part, with the fact that we have letters and the Gospels written at different times. To the best of our knowledge, we can approximate that the letter of James was written around 50 AD, that Mark and the Epistle of Jude were written around 60 AD, Matthew was written about 80 AD, Luke was written about 90 AD, and so was John. With those facts in mind, I tried to piece together how the apostles might have known one another prior to Jesus' ministry. Excuse me. And I think that I have a very unique take on the relationships that Jesus had with his apostles. Some of them, I believe, are cousins, distant cousins, a niece, a nephew, and I'll get to those details in a minute. But first, I want to say the dates that I believe that different apostles were born. In the back of my King James Bible, I have a chart that discusses the apostles and their history. On this list, I kept going back and comparing it to the Gospels because it discusses who their parents were, or supposed parents. It discusses what sort of business they had, and of what their titles and other titles might be, including some surnames. In the days Jesus was on the earth, people were known by their given name, and then son of, or bar if you were speaking Aramaic, or Ben if you were speaking Hebrew, their father's name. So, Simon, who was later known as Peter, would be known as Simon Bar Jonah, colloquially, and I think formally he might have been Simon Ben Jonah. I'm going to list the apostles and the dates that I believe they were born. And then I will discuss why I think that. Judas Iscariot is the oldest, by far. I believe, I looked it up, and we don't really know what Iscariot means. Some people think it's Sicarii, having to do with the Zealots, or the band of Sicarii that came after, but I don't think so. Iscariot might have also been a place south of Judah where there were sheep farms and things like that. I believe that Judas Iscariot was born in 23 BC, making him about 50 years old by the time he began traveling around with Jesus. I see him as a shepherd who was actually sold into slavery. And I think that John the Baptist's parents, Zechariah and Elisheva, took him in and raised him as a slave. And by the time he joins Jesus' ministry, Zechariah and Elisheva have both passed away. And Judas has been a slave. But he has been a slave to someone close to Jesus. And so his desire to remain close to the family is partially due to that. The next born, I have Nathaniel. No. I have Philip, who was from Bethsaida, born at 16 BC. I believe he was a shipbuilder along the Sea of Galilee. And I think that he knew the family through a mutual friend or a wedding. I actually believe that his sister marries, what's his name? Marries Joseph Alphaeus of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea. So Philip's sister marries Joseph of Arimathea, and actually that would make Matthew related to Jesus in some way. Matthew, I have him being born around 12 AD because I believe that he would be young enough to be able to pen the Gospel of Matthew at about 80 AD. Nathaniel, I have him being born at 7 BC, and he knows Thomas, who was born in 10 BC. So I have some that are going to be in their 30s or 40s, and some followers of Jesus that are going to be in their teens and 20s. Simon the Zealot was born in 3 AD, according to how I envision this. And I believe that he was actually a brother of Jesus. I believe that he took the death of Joseph, his father, very poorly and decided to join the Zealots as a way to feel more empowered, because when he lost his father, he felt powerless. I have Jude and James. Jude being born at 16 AD. James, Jesus' brother, born at 3 BC. And I also have a James the Less, who is a different James, actually. So the same way that we have 3 different or 4 different Marys in the Gospels, I think we also have maybe 3 or 4 different Jameses at the time. John, the beloved disciple, I think is Jesus' nephew from his sister Salome, who married Zebedee. I think Zebedee had a child with a woman who passed away, and that child ends up being James. And then John is actually Jesus' cousin. And those are the sons of thunder. I think that making them younger, born at 9 AD and 17 AD respectively, makes them teenagers when the ministry begins, and therefore it makes sense why they're so haughty, and they request that Jesus burn the village down, something like that, because they... Anyway, I think that making them teenagers makes that make a whole lot more sense than a man in his 30s who happens to be zealous. We also have Andrew and Simon Peter. I don't think that they were physically, biologically related to Jesus in any way, but I do think because they followed John the Baptist first, they were introduced to Jesus and it wasn't a big deal. So I have Simon Peter born at 1 AD and Andrew born at 5 AD. I think that that's everybody. But aging them in this particular way makes the gospel make more sense to me because of the dates that we can most, at this point in history, most accurately determine when these books were written. So of course there is some controversy there, and by the time I publish this thing, it might be the case that we find a copy of the Gospels from, I don't know, 40 AD, but we just haven't yet, so I have to go with what we have at the moment. Best estimations that I've seen over a cursory research of when the Gospels were written. Mark was written between 60 and 68 AD, Matthew around 80 AD, Luke Acts around maybe 70 AD, because the theory is that it was written prior to the temple's destruction. And the Gospel of John, I've seen some sources that date it at about 90 AD, and I've also seen sources that date it between 105 and 110 AD. And that's one of the reasons that I'm making John, his nephew, so much younger than Jesus, because I think that it would make a lot more sense for him to be able to write this gospel much later if he was alive. So those are my best guesses for right now, and some of these relationships are going to be very, very interesting. So I look forward to hearing back from anybody about if they find this interesting, if they don't, and I will continue doing these little controversial videos. Thank you.